This is Conspirinormal.
Okay, welcome back to Conspirinormal, guys, episode 302, and we are here, and it's myself, Adam, and Sergio, and we got a special guest on the line to start off. We're not starting off with the guest right away, but we have someone here that wants to talk about a Kickstarter that they're doing. And you guys, if you went to the Strange Realities conference that we did last year in Nashville, you may have met the MC of the event, who was dressed up like a famous pro wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
And was distributing Slim Jims and also reading horrible Yo Mama jokes to the audience and doing paranormal trivia.
This is true. It was I was wearing a lot of hats that day. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a blast to be a part of.
Yes, you were.
And to see the future Strange Realities for sure.
And you got you actually came and helped us out a lot. And you not only did you MC, but you also filmed the entire event.
Yeah, it was cool to actually. I had some film equipment from a previous horror film I was part of. The director retired because I guess nobody watched the horror films he was making. So he sold all the stuff to me, and yeah, I'm happy to be able to use it for something, positive and cool. So
yeah,
it's awesome footage, man. We really think we're gonna have some opportunities for people to be able to see that real soon.
Yeah, it's interesting footage. I got to say, I went there to film, and I was surprised how many times I was taken aback just listening to what everybody had to say, and it's a real eye opener. It's amazing what you guys are doing. It's cool you're getting this information out there.
Yeah, we had some amazing speakers and some amazing guests, some amazing attendees. I was really happy about it. And I'm just now getting to the point where I'm going through all that footage, and we've got somebody that's also close to the show that's editing that now. And there's going to be some stuff available probably on our Patreon pretty soon, so people will get to see what you've filmed. So
heck yeah, all right.
But you've got something else going on right now, and something that you want to promote, and we're going to talk about that a little bit because it's got a little paranormal theme to it. And that's something called Faraway Angel. So people maybe not have heard you before on the show. Kind of give a little bit of background about what it is that you're doing and the why you're doing this Faraway Angel project, what this is.
Okay. If you go to Kickstarter and you type in Faraway Angel, what that is that's a song title. My father, his name's Jason Von Stein, and he's a songwriter. And he's been writing songs all of his life, since the 60s, literally all of his life. And he's amassed a collection of over 5,000 songs. I know that's an outrageous number, but it's literally, in some cases, it's true. He's been writing songs all of his life. He started off writing poetry, and upon getting a guitar, he started piecing it together. And now our house, you can't even throw away a piece of paper because there's some sort of melody or some sort of lyric or something like that on it. This is a song that my father wrote on October 15th, 1989. It's called Faraway Angel. And it's always been one of my favorite songs that my father wrote. And I started a Kickstarter for him in 2017. I wanted to make a music video for him because he wrote all these songs. So what we did is we selected 30 of his songs for that Kickstarter. And we were hoping to get a $1,000 budget to make a music video of one of those songs. And we came up with music video ideas for 30 of my father's songs, one for each day. And we let the audience decide the music video that they wanted to see. And it turns out that my idea for this music video was a part of that, but it wasn't the one that was selected. We ended up going with Streets of Chicago. And I'm happy to say that on Christmas Day of 2017, I was able to release that music video. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Von Stein Streets of Chicago, you can see the music video for Streets of Chicago, which is, I'm biased, but I think it's a really good song. I think it's really entertaining. Faraway Angel is another song of my father's that I've always enjoyed. It's actually probably my favorite song of my father's, but I play his music out now. My father, he's written all these songs, and he doesn't play his music out anymore because he has emphysema. Emphysema is a disease that affects your lungs. Basically, he has fluid in his lungs, And because he has fluid in his lungs, he's not able to do physical activities anymore. He can't play guitar anymore. He can't even walking around, even opening a refrigerator. It causes a lot of issues. It's hard for him to get around. He's on oxygen 24 hours a day. When he started getting diagnosed with emphysema, I thought it was he's written all these songs all of his life, and no one's really heard them. And I think that's something needs to be done about that. So I started playing his music out, and it's been a dream to come out and play music. I was always afraid of playing music, and I think singing in front of people was like kind of terrifying. I think most people probably think that.
Yeah, you taught yourself to play guitar and to get up there.
Yeah,
and took voice lessons and all that just to do this.
I did. Yeah, I've been. Right now, I'm not working right now. I've been dedicating a lot of time towards getting my father's music out there and trying to raise emphysema awareness. I'm lucky and blessed that I'm able to work with the COPD Foundation. I was able to get Streets of Chicago on their website, and what I do is I share. My father lives in Chattanooga. I live in Atlanta, so I play shows at least weekly. I try to play every night, and what I do is I live stream the shows for my father to watch from Chattanooga. And through doing that, I've also joined a lot of emphysema groups on Facebook and different groups like that, and I've shared the music that way. And it's been a real blessing to see how it's helping a lot of people. You know, the emphysema affects a lot of people. A lot of people. You know, I started off as an actor. That's why I moved to Atlanta. And I was very influenced by older movies. And if you watch older films, everybody's smoking. You know, my father started smoking when he was 12 because it was just the normal thing to do. I remember as a kid, nobody questioned me going and buying cigarettes from a vending machine and whatnot and giving them to my parents because it was not even, nobody questioned it. You know, it was just like the normal thing to do. And it's affected a lot of people. There's a whole generation of people, and generations still get affected by emphysema. So I want to take my father's music, and I'd like to raise emphysema awareness with it if possible. And that's part of the reason why I started this Kickstarter. My idea for the music video, it matches with the Conspirinormal theme, I think, because the theme of the music video is it takes place in a Frankenstein lab. And my idea is Frankenstein is trying to bring a beautiful woman to life. And as he's trying to bring the beautiful woman to life, a bunch of mishaps keep happening. And instead of bringing the beautiful woman to life, he starts bringing dead musicians to life. And now all these zombies are like walking around, not knocking everything over. It's not going to be a serious video at all. It's going to be like Looney Tunes kind of. I want to make it a fun thing that, you know, everybody can appreciate. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping to do. I'd like to, you know, take my father's songs and his collection of music and, you know, do positive things with it, raise emphysema awareness, raise other types of awareness that needs to be, you know, brought out there. My father writes about everything. He writes about a lot of the atrocities that our world's facing nowadays. And, you know, it's a real honor to get out there and talk about these things and kind of, you know, shine some light on this in a way, I would say.
Yeah, he's got a whole backlog of songs that he's worked on for years and years and years and years. And you've really done well in getting out there and playing the songs and doing videos. I think that's a pretty unique way to do it. And to get people, have you had a lot of people like look at that first video?
Since the Streets of Chicago, we got over 3,000 views on that one, and we made another music video. There's a group of people in Alabama that are helping me with this Kickstarter. A guy named Jason O'Brien, and he works for a company, Fastlane Productions. And him and my friend Rachel Marshall, they created a music video for another one of his songs called Brown Jug, which if you listen to the lyrics of Brown Jug, it's a really poignant song. I think it like kind of talks about alcoholism a little bit. But it's one of those things that I think, you know, needs to be talked about. It needs to be out there in the open, you know. My grandfather was an alcoholic, so I think my father was probably influenced by that a little bit, and that might be why he writes about things that were so deep and so, you know, touching and whatnot. So I invite you to check it out. If you check out Von Stein, Brown Jug, that's another music video you can check out. That one's you know, it's got a lot of drama to it. It might make you cry at the end of it, but, you know, I think it's a really good song. It's worth listening to. Faraway Angel, we're going to try to make that a little more fun, more, you know, Looney Toony kind of thing.
Gotcha. Where can people find the Kickstarter? Where can people go if they want to help you out, donate?
Yeah, if you go to, if you just type in Kickstarter and go type in Faraway Angel, we should be the only Faraway Angel available on there. And we just started. My father's birthday is February 13th, so I started on February 13th, and it's going to be a 30-day Kickstarter. And every day we're getting more and more updates, so people can follow along to see, all the updates. I just uploaded I included the storyboard today. I drew like a 10-page storyboard of what we're hoping to accomplish with the music video. It's kind of like a comic book version of it. But I just uploaded that today, so you can check that out and kind of see what we're going for. And you can follow along there. We'll be going until March 13th on this Kickstarter. And it's going to lead right into, we're actually, Adam's going to be coming to Atlanta. We're doing another fundraiser for an awesome cause called the Drake House, which what they do is they help single women find housing, single mothers find homes. And that's going to be March 14th in Atlanta. So we're going to be going all the way up to that, so topping out homelessness, and you can follow along and see all the fun updates that go along with it.
And I will say this, I will be there, and I've talked to Jerry from Nox Mente. He will be there too, because he lives out there close to you in that area. So we'll have a table set up. I don't exactly know what we're going to do yet. Maybe if anybody wants to talk about weird paranormal stories, I definitely would be down to get them on, to record them. But that's what, so I will be there. So if anybody wants a Conspirinormal meetup, I guess a Nox Mente meetup, then come find us. That's March 14th, right?
Saturday, March 14th. If you go on Facebook, you can type in the second annual Tapping Out Homelessness event, and that'll give you all the detailed information. It's going to be at Truck and Tap Alpharetta. It's going to be 2 to 10 p.m. We got live music all day. I'll be playing Faraway Angel there. I'll be playing an hour of my father's original songs. And we got a great lineup. We really got some of the best musicians Atlanta have to offer. Mark Williams is going to be playing violin. We got Joseph E. Reed. He's going to be playing violin. We got a slew of great people. Jordan Armstrong's going to be there. E.T., we got E.T., he lives in Chattanooga. He's going to be coming out. Sean Allen, if you remember from Strange Realities, he helped run sound. He's going to be playing music.
Asked a couple of good questions, too.
He did. He asked a lot. Yeah, he's really interested. He's got an interesting Bigfoot story. So make sure you come and talk to Sean about his Bigfoot experience that he had happen. And Lori Lockey's going to be playing with him. I'll be playing my dad's music with Mark and Joseph on violin. And yeah, it's going to be a great night. Adam's going to come out. Please come on out. Talk about, anything Drake House, Conspirinormal, anything you feel like talking about. Just come and have a good time with us.
All right, Jason, thank you so much, man. That's great. Give the website for the Kickstarter one more time.
Yeah, if you go to Kickstarter, just type in Faraway Angel, and you can follow along, and you can donate if you like to, and if nothing else, you get to listen to some cool music. So thank you very much for having me. It's a real honor to be a part of this. I look forward to Strange Realities and our strange future. So.
Yep, and that's September 26th and 27th, September 25th and 26th, this year, guys. So tickets will be going on sale soon if they're not already on sale by the time this posts. So thank you, Jason. Stay on the line for us. And guys, we will be back with AP Strange talking about some real weird stuff from the Liminal Earth blog and some other material. So we'll be right back. And we are back. And we have the main guest this evening. We have our good buddy, Matt Hopwell.
Otherwise known as AP Strange.
That's right, a.k.a.
Hey, guys.
Hey, man. How's it going? We're glad to have you on the show. It's interesting that how this show came about is there's actually going to be another guy that I got on. I got 2 more episodes really out of the episode 300. And you had hit me up about coming on, and I had seen talking about like your personal stories on episode 300, and you talked about some of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. And when you told me what we were going to talk about, what you want to talk about, I said, well, you know what, that really should just be its own show. And it also turned out that you and I follow each other on Twitter. And we have a common friend in Mr. Banal, Tim, formerly of Banal of America.
Formerly, it's still going, man.
Oh, sort of. You know, he does it whenever he wants to. But but Banal's a good friend of ours. He was just here at Strange Realities, and he'll be back here at Strange Realities 2020.
And he was on the 300th episode.
Yeah, and he was on the three. We managed to get him to call on the 300th episode.
He made quite an entrance in that one.
Yeah. Well, he likes to make an entrance. And so like I had told him that you were somebody that I've been meaning to hit up for a while, actually, to come on and talk. And I was like glad that you did. So here we are, got you on the show. Tell people a little bit about your two blogs. You've got the apstrange.com, and then you've got Liminal Earth.
That's not just a blog, it's like a database pretty much, and map of
right
strange happenings.
Right. So let's kind of talk about these two projects that you're doing, what these are.
Okay. Well, for my own personal blog, I kind of got started with that about a year ago. Doesn't get updated a whole lot. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to how my posts turn out, so I I take my time with them. I've been interested in all this crazy stuff for most of my life. So about a year ago, I decided to get into actually writing about it and starting a Twitter account just to put little tidbits out there every day. And the blog was kind of to expand on any weird ideas I had. The latest stuff I've been working on is the Ashtar Galactic Command interference in 1977. That's taken up the better part of my research time for the past year. And Liminal Earth is a little different because that wasn't started by me. That was originally, it was called Liminal Seattle. It was started by two guys, Jeremy Puma and Garrett Kelly, out in Seattle, to document all the weirdness going on around there. So the whole idea is to take any weird thing that happens to you and be able to put it on a map and share it with the rest of the world. So it's an interactive map that covers the whole globe.
Yeah.
They eventually opened it up to everybody, so everybody everywhere. I started following them on Twitter back when they were just Liminal Seattle. And I remember thinking, this is so cool, I wish I could add to it, but I've never even been to Seattle. Yeah. It seems to me they could open it up to the whole world. So I eventually they did, and then they started a program that they call ambassadors. You can get an ambassadorship into the Society for Liminal Cartography, and that's what I'm doing there, is to help them out by being an ambassador for my region of Massachusetts. So they bestowed me with a snazzy title as an ambassador for my region. So I'm the Deputy Director of Liminal Compliance for Massachusetts and Environs.
Liminal compliance.
Liminal compliance. Let's talk a little bit about why we're using the terminology liminal.
Right. Yeah. Well, it seems to be everywhere these days. You hear it in a lot of paranormal conversation, the idea of liminality and kind of existing between worlds, or the overlapping of different things. So it's a great name for the map. It's things that are strange, that are paranormal, that are everything in between. Not necessarily every story on the map is something that you would call paranormal. It's just something kind of odd, maybe, but yeah, the idea, there seems to be a lot more overlap now between different fields of weirdness and the paranormal, like ufology and ghosts and cryptozoology, kind of overlapping with each other these days more than there used to be. And this map is kind of the perfect place for that. We don't really have preconceived notions there. There's no debunking or fact checking. We just want to hear people's stories, and we want them to put it on the map, and maybe or figure some of this stuff out.
Cool. I listened to you guys have some podcasts on there, and I listened to the first one where you guys were talking about the beginnings of the Liminal Earth project, and kind of you guys have these ideas about remythologizing the landscape is something I heard, and paranormal.
That's kind of our tagline. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
And paranormal cartography, which is really
Right.
cool. And you guys just started documenting all these experiences to kind of create like a data bank, and you were documenting dreams too.
Right. Yeah. No, it really runs the gamut. I mean, we have a reincarnation story up on the map. Just strange places. We have all these different categories that you can add to when you make a submission. So if people go to liminal.earth, I probably should have led with that a little bit. The actual website. Liminal.earth is where you find it. And we have all these different categories of things that you can report, from creatures to thin places to UFOs to straight up ghosts. And it can be more than one category, or it can be just one. Whatever you want to pick. So
the idea with paranormal cartography is you could find relationships to perhaps, like concentrated phenomena in certain areas and look for other things. And it's got a lot of cool implications.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the possibilities are endless. One thing that occurred to me is if you experience something strange that you never felt like telling anybody about, and I think that tends to be the case, even if people are generally accepting of a ghost story, I find, but you don't really want to go out telling people you saw a ghost, but at least you have a word for it. If you see something really weird that you have no explanation for, and you look on this map and you find that somebody else saw something that seems similar to it nearby or kind of in the same place, then that kind of, that's the kind of pattern that's really important to me, but
give someone validation.
A little bit of validation, yeah. And the idea that some of these different things are related, it's kind of interesting to see what reports come from where. And we're interested in all the different all the information you can get about a place, from the composition of the land to the topography to what's nearby it, waterways, the weather that day, time of day. All of these things can be really important to a report. It's almost the minutiae of the paranormal. But remythologizing the landscape is the biggest part of it. You tend to think of your hometown as being very familiar and mundane to you until you can think of a weird thing that happened somewhere that you heard about. It builds a mythology upon the street that you walk down every day.
So what kind of stories have you gotten over there in Massachusetts? What's some of the weirder ones that you've gathered for this project? And are there any that kind of correspond with each other that say, some people will say, hey, well, I experienced that too, give that validation?
Well, Massachusetts has a long history. I did submit a couple of my own personal stories there, and we have the coastal areas that tend to have a higher degree of ghost stories, and I think that comes a lot from it's just we have a lot of old places around here. And along the coast especially, coastal towns tend to have this kind of ghostly mystique to them.
And I think you were talking about kind of it's got a real colonial Lovecraftian kind of vibe.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lovecraft was from New England. I like to think that all the, and Stephen King too, for that matter. So there's a reason for that. New England can be a pretty spooky place.
Yeah, it was a spooky place to the Puritans when they got there.
Or maybe the Puritans were just spooky.
Yeah, that's probably the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, one of the earliest recorded UFO sighting was from Massachusetts in 1635, I think, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Lights being seen off the Boston Harbor by men in a boat.
Okay.
And then
that's very early.
It is, yeah. It was recorded by the governor of the colony, I think the Plymouth colony at the time, or Massachusetts Bay Colony. His name's not coming to me at the moment. This is not one I mapped yet, but I was looking into it recently. Because a couple of years later, there's a story that's actually recorded by Jacques Vallée in one of his books that sounds a lot like an abduction encounter. Again, a couple of men on a boat, and they see a light going across the sky, and they describe it as being in the shape of a swine, whatever that means. And then after it disappears, they find that they're 3 miles down the river from where they had started. So yeah, you have a little bit of what seems like a missing time or being transported.
So many people on boats see stuff. It's weird.
Yeah, but that one was on a river and not the ocean, so that's kind of interesting too. But we have a surprising amount of Bigfoot in Massachusetts. I never really thought that was the case growing up.
Yeah, that's interesting in and of all itself, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just north of where I live is an area called Monsterland. So we're getting accounts from there. It's the Leominster State Forest and the surrounding areas in Leominster and Princeton, Massachusetts. That the name Monsterland was coined by Ronnie LeBlanc, who I think is on that Expedition Bigfoot show now. But
so that's just an informal name. It's not actually called Monsterland.
I'm not sure if he coined it, but that's the name of his book, and that's what some people call it because of the amount of weird stuff that happens there. Yeah,
I mean it's not called that on a map.
Nope, I never heard of that growing up. Yeah, it wasn't until I saw a presentation at the Leominster UFO Festival back in, I guess, 2016 that I ever heard of that. But since then, I've actually met Ronnie, and I have a copy of that book. And there's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool stories from there. And one of my encounters that I put on the map was not far from there. So I think we got 2 related to Monsterland up there so far. But
of course, you do have the Bridgewater Triangle too. That's that's like western Massachusetts, right?
Nope. It's the South Shore, Massachusetts, pretty much.
Okay.
So it's south of Boston and extends partly into Rhode Island.
Okay.
And that's on the map as just one big entry, the Bridgewater Triangle, but that covers a pretty massive area between the south of Boston and northern Rhode Island, Bridgewater, Easton, areas like that, and the Hockomock Swamp.
Very famous for the Pukwudgie.
The Pukwudgie, yep. Yeah, there's supposed to be a ghost of a hitchhiker there. There's supposed to be, orbs of light, UFOs, Sasquatch, a little bit of everything. There's a ledge that people feel compelled to jump off of when they get near it. It's like a suicide ledge. So yeah, I actually haven't had the opportunity to visit the Bridgewater Triangle yet, because it's one of those. Anytime you have a triangle, it's actually a massive swath of land that covers a whole bunch of different towns. So you need a particular destination to go to, and I haven't really gotten around to it yet.
As far as across the whole globe, what are some of the most fantastic, or ones that really stick out, submissions so far to Liminal Earth?
The more fantastic ones. Let's see. I picked out a few of my favorites here.
Yeah,
I don't know if that fits with the fantastic. Well, this one that I got one queued up here. That's the it's called Weird Hijinks at the Guardians. So this is submitted by a woman that was driving down the National Trails Highway from Route 66. And I guess there's these two large stone foo dogs, these statues that like you would see outside of a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah.
And they face the mountains and deserts and caves. So this is California, I think we're talking right now. And she said the dirt around the statues was torn up like somebody had made a labyrinth, like the path around the property between the statues with a truck. And she went out to take photos of it. And she pulled off the road at some point to find cigarettes. And let's see. She got out of the car at one point, and then this guy gets in the car after she walked away. She sees him getting out of the car, and she shouts at him. And instead of fighting or running off, he just gave an excuse. He was just checking the car, like he was just checking the car out. And I don't know. It's just a really bizarre story with these statues in the middle of the desert, and they nobody really knows how they got there. That's one of my favorite things, is something large that everybody sees and they don't know how it got there. Right. And then just have this strange guy like get in her car as she's walking her dogs around is even weirder. So it's just kind of
it's weird.
Yeah, she ties it into to the OTO lodge out there and stuff like that. There's all kinds of ideas. So that one's worth checking out.
That's what she thinks, that the OTO.
Well, right. She says that there's satanic lore in quotation marks.
Yeah.
And if you do Google searches, you get creepypastas and everything else about it. But I guess it's not too far from where the Agape Lodge would have been and stuff like that. So, and when I looked into it on Atlas Obscura and other sites, I guess only one of the statues is still there. So the other one got taken down or removed somehow. But originally there were two. So that's one that struck me the first time I read it. And I thought, that's really wild. Like, just, driving down a highway in a desert and seeing these statues and being like, what's that all about?
It's weird.
And you look into the history of it, and then you're finding creepypastas about satanic stuff, and you just try to walk your dogs, and someone gets in your car. It's definitely something weird going on in that place.
Yeah, it's definitely a little. Of course, some of those satanic stuff is a little probably just speculation or sensationalism. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as soon as people see something spooky, they gravitate towards satanic, or demonic.
Right. Yeah.
So it depends on the point of view of the person that sees it. But yeah, that actually has a tie-in with the Bridgewater Triangle too. Is some of those towns they thought there were satanic rituals going on there and stuff like that, but a lot of that's unverified.
You've heard the 300th episode, well, the first part of it, where we talked to Joe Kistner, talking about some of these missing people that he was investigating in Minnesota.
Yep.
And there's that element there too, some weird cult out there that people thought was some kind of weird satanic cult, and the cattle mutilation stuff that goes with that was always blamed on satanic cults too. And
right, yeah. I mean, you have to wonder how prevalent that stuff is.
Right.
Did you guys see the Small Town Monsters doc about the Beast of Bray Road?
I don't think I've seen that one. I haven't seen that one yet.
You guys need to check that one out, because there's part of that where there's they get into a satanic cult with like elite people that come from all over. And it sounds pretty wild, and they mention it to, I can't remember if he was the sheriff or if he was the animal control. I think he was the animal control officer in the documentary. And he's just kind of like, yeah, I mean, there is a cult. They're out there in the woods. And I just kind of pretend they're not. I just look the other way when. And I'm watching this documentary thinking, wow, this guy for just a small town animal control officer has to deal with an awful lot of crap. Like, how prevalent is that stuff that your local, essentially dog catcher or somebody that has to deal with foxes or raccoons and stuff is like, oh yeah, and that's satanic cult. I don't worry about them too much. I don't bother them. They don't bother me.
It might not be a good idea to bother them.
You got to wonder how
Right.
how prevalent that stuff is across the country, and then also too, that we talked to Tony Kale last week, and kind of the idea that what people interpret as a satanic cult could be something completely totally different.
Yeah, and it's usually just some kind of mainstream paganism.
Right. It's just a lot of people don't really get it or understand what it is. Was there others that you wanted to share with us from your personal favorites
Oh yeah.
before we get to the main event?
I liked. Oh sure. Yep. I really liked this one. That's called the. I hope I pronounce it right. It's called the Tigard Triangle. This one just kind of. This isn't spooky or scary to me at all, really. It's in Oregon, and it was submitted by a girl named Audra. And this kind of gets to what I tend to think of the paranormal. It doesn't have to be scary. Sometimes it's just kind of a cool thing that you coexist with. She said she lived in the house for about 7 years, and about a month after she moved in, she would see a small black shadow in her house running around. And every time she turned to look at it, it would just kind of disappear. And she didn't feel threatened by it. So she thought of it as like the ghost of a cat. So she has basically a ghost cat in her house. So the 2 concrete steps at her back door have little kitty paw prints. Like there was a cat that jumped up when it was still wet and left like wet paw prints there. Shadow that she couldn't really get a good look at. And she would talk at it as though it was a cat that belonged to her. So she would say like, it's okay, don't run away, like don't be scared. And after living there a while, she would feel something jump up on her bed and take little tiny steps. And at the time she didn't have any cats. So like it was like a ghost cat would just jump up and cuddle with her. And she has 2 cats now, according to the entry. And she says that sometimes they do the normal thing that all cats do, where they seem to just be looking at nothing and following nothing around the house. There could be a bug or a spot of light. But she's noticed that she'll feel one of them jump up on the bed and look around and there's no cat in the room. Or she'll feel something jump up on the bed after the 2 cats are there. And she said the cats don't seem bothered by it, but they usually make room for the ghost cat when it jumps up on the bed. Which
so
I don't know.
They sense it too,
yeah. That kind of thing to me is really cool. It's just, you have a sense that there's something there. Your cats react to it. But, before you ever had the cats, you were experiencing all this stuff, and that's the kind of wonder I like in the paranormal versus the demonic stuff. Because that's kind of a nice story. It's kind of cute, but
Right.
A ghost cat is still a ghost, and you really have to wonder what that is.
Well, the more that you look into the paranormal, the more you realize that a lot of it is kind of mundane. It has mundane aspects to it.
Oh, it absolutely does.
And that's one of the things that I find completely fascinating.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people that I respect in interviews that hunt ghosts, that do research on haunted locations, say that you can't really just spend a couple hours in a haunted place and expect something to happen, because a lot of the stuff that is going to happen is going to be completely mundane. You might have to spend a few months in a place to see something spectacular, but there's going to be a lot of little things, little things, and a lot of the little things are kind of what we're looking for on the map. The stuff that people would normally shrug off and walk away, and not give a second thought to, and not want to talk about with anybody, So, I mean, I think a lot of people also feel the need to try to embellish their story or not want to tell it because they don't think it's fantastic enough.
Right.
Right.
And that it's important to remember that, it's part of your story, and the fact that it is your story, the fact that it is something you can't account for means it's something we want to hear. Doesn't have to be crazy. It just more data for the map.
Right, because that's kind of that's the point of it, is to collect the data, collect the stories, collect the different kinds of stories. And I mean, just these events are just as unique as people, as unique as the people that experience them.
Right. I mean, I grew up in a house that I would consider haunted, and you would,
Too,
yeah. And if somebody asks you what happened there, it's like, well, where do I start? I could I could talk to you all day about stuff that happened there, but a lot of it seems pretty boring. It's a lot of small things that added up over time, and a few bigger things, but it's all those little things kind of add up.
Let's talk about the Ashtar command transmissions.
So on your blog, AP Strange, you have a 3-part blog post called "The Curious Case of the Fish Doctor and the Man from Ashtar Command."
Yep. That's something I've spent the better part of my time researching in the past year, and it's a story I just kind of stumbled on. At the beginning of the interview, I was talking about updating that periodically, the blog, that is. And when I started it, I didn't have a particular direction I was going in with it, and all the time I had been doing research on various aspects of the paranormal. I had also made the acquaintance of my good friend Steve Mills in England. He lives in Coventry, and started to unfold this story about the broadcast interruption in 1977 on the southern England. I'm sorry, I had to plug in the computer; it was dying.
No problem.
We
don't want that to happen
on my end too. Yeah. So a lot of people know that story. It's a pretty famous one. It makes the rounds usually in November because that's the anniversary of it. November 26, 1977, at 5:12 p.m. on the news program transmitted to southern London was interrupted by a broadcast from Ashtar Galactic Command. So this was the starting point for me. I found this video, and Steve had a huge story to tell about it. So it's been kind of between me interviewing him about the investigation that he did with it to kind of his mentor, Rex Studda, who was a ufologist and theosophist from the time, and a fish doctor, and notably a fish doctor also.
Okay, so is there more to what a fish doctor does than just saying that he's a fish doctor? Is there?
Okay,
this is.
I had to use the term fish doctor because I feel like that draws you in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And the story just gets weirder and weirder the more you look at it. But Rex had so much going on in his bio that Fish Doctor seems like as good a place to start as any. That was kind of his main. He referred to it as his bread and butter. He ran a fish tank. Well, Fish Tanks Ltd. It was a fish shop aquarium on Blandford Street in London, and he specialized in nursing fish back to health. There's a video in the Pathé archives that Steve had sent me when he first started telling me about Rex, and it's just called Fish Heartbeats. And I remember he sent me the video, and I said, "What the hell is this?" And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, "Okay." I thought maybe it would be something kind of goofy and funny, but no, there's Rex and his wife Olive in the video, and they show how they nurse fish back to health by monitoring the heart rate and kind of giving them more oxygen, because he could tell that the heart rate was too high, but with the sophisticated equipment he had in 1953, and he's administering doses of oxygen to the fish, and helping it to breathe better, and the heart rate slows, and then the fish is good as new. So, I mean, he was an expert on exotic fish and fish care. He wrote 20 books about the subject.
That's the Fish Doctor. Right.
And he was known around the world too, which ends up being important because he had a lot of very wealthy customers and a lot of, high level connections around the world, because people relied on him for their fish and advice on fish.
Was he a pioneer in the world of fish doctoring?
He is actually still considered by a lot of people that keep aquariums with exotic fish, I guess. I mean, Steve has told me even recently, people that he's met that keep fish and as pets will recognize the name,
So you started corresponding with this guy, Steve, who actually used to be friends with this guy, Rex. And they were both also investigating this newscast interruption that they had in the past. And I guess Rex was interested in it because he was a part of a radio call-in show in 1971 that had something similar happen, or not interrupted, right, but had a call from some being that was similar.
Well, it was
claimed to be.
It was a little bit of both because, Rex's interest in UFOs started in 1954. I was able to figure out that from a Theosophy obituary, a Theosophy publication obituary, that his mother actually gave him a copy of Flying Saucers Have Landed by Adamski and Leslie in 1954, which began his interest in UFOs and simultaneously Theosophy. His mother and his wife were already members of the Theosophical Society in London. And he kind of dove into the UFO subject and Theosophy simultaneously because one explained the other very well for him. Mm. So by 1971, he had already written a book called Flying Saucer Viewpoint. That came out in 1970, and it shows, I have all three of his saucer books. So that brings the total of all his books to 23, which is a significant number for me. When he was on the radio show in 1971, it was on the heels of Flying Saucer Viewpoint coming out. Okay. So he had already written a book about UFOs when he was on this program, and that's why he was there. So it was a call-in radio show where they wanted calls from the public related to flying saucers. It seems like the producer and the assistant producer and the host of the show were all treating it as, well, this will be a fun little thing to do, and we'll get some interest generated and get a lot of calls, and our ratings will go up. I guess it was a relatively new radio station at the time, or a new show. But the call that came in actually blocked all the channels on the mixing board, so it was coming through all of them simultaneously. And whenever the voice,
Okay.
whenever the voice from outer space would speak, none of the dials would register audio. So the engineers were flabbergasted because they couldn't cut the call, and they couldn't see it on the dials. Whenever he talked, whenever the assistant producer would talk, they could see it. So what they did is they broadcast advertisements while the assistant producer talked, and that was just the assistant producer basically interviewed the man from outer space.
Yeah, and there's a transcript of that.
Yes, we have a transcript of it, only thanks to Rex, because there was also a tape made.
Right, that's lost.
So, yeah, nobody knows where the tape is.
But Rex supposedly heard it.
He did, yeah. The first time that Steve went to Rex's house, they were actually investigating the radio call, and there was an engineer there that had the tape of the call from outer space, and so Steve has actually heard the tape before. He heard it that day, and we both kind of assumed that Rex had a copy of it, but nobody knows where this recording is now, unless it's stashed away in archives somewhere. I hold out hope that there's going to be eventually it'll pop up in some internet archive, but it would be amazing to actually hear it.
Yeah, it's possible. A couple years ago, a recording, elusive recording that I was looking for finally came to light in the public. So you never know, man.
Yeah. It's, some weirdo had the tape and didn't know what it was, and then finally listened to it, put it on the internet.
So that was 1971.
Yep.
Correct. And then there's a more famous one though that actually did get recorded, right? That actually was a satellite interruption
on television.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one on the television was 1977.
Okay.
So that's what's kind of interesting is Steve meets Rex in the meantime, and they're investigating this radio call from 1971, and then before, in the midst of their friendship and getting to know each other. So Rex is much older than Steve. Steve was about 18 at the time, so he considered himself kind of a protege of Rex, and while they're investigating this 1971. Interference, this would be about 1975-76, and then the 77 one happened after that. So they ended up investigating that together pretty much more in real time. They were able to to go check it out right after it happened rather than tracking down a tape 4 or 5 years after the event.
Do they say that the voice sounded similar?
Yeah, the voice sounded similar. Steve described it at one point as like it had an effect that he called a harmonizer, which he said didn't exist in 1971, but it's something that would be used on on like a rock and roll album.
Yeah, like a vocoder.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Or just doesn't even have to be a vocoder. It's just some kind of weird processor. Like I definitely think it could have existed in 71, no problem.
Right.
I've heard things from 71 with all kinds of weird vocal effects.
Right, and you can, and like Doctor Who was around back then, and there was a lot of those weird kind of voices on.
Especially England, you got the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. I mean, they were doing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, yep. But I mean, there were a lot of weird things about both interferences that would have made it really hard for it to be manufactured as a prank by somebody, So there's a lot of really suspicious stuff around both. And if anybody wants to hear the 1977 ITV disruption, just, plug that into the Google machine. There are videos on YouTube, and you can kind of hear what the voice sounds like to get it. Now you can't really make out what the voice is saying. At least I can't. But there are transcripts of that as well, and some of the parts of it are debated over what exactly he's saying. So
okay. Can you kind of summarize the message of it, or I know you probably got some of the actual text too, but
I do have it pulled up too.
So what's the general gist of it?
It's well in theme. It's very close to what you would expect from any of the contactees of the 50s. It's very much in line with humanity needs to save itself and abandon war and nuclear armament and stuff like that. The basic crux of it is very much in line with a lot of the traditional Ashtar stuff that you would have gotten in the Giant Rock days with Van Tassel and Robert Short and all those guys. So this all had a very strong meaning for Rex because he's looking at it through the lens of theosophy. So it all makes sense to him, and he goes in great depth in his book, or in his 3 books about what the flying saucer message is. To him, it's basically the dawning of the age of Aquarius and moving into the next root race of people, the next evolution of mankind.
So is he bringing in the whole like ascended masters concept into this?
Absolutely. That's totally what he's doing.
He sees the same message basically from.
Yeah.
So this is like a channeled text, but it's.
Yeah. Well, this is the same. Sorry, this is the same concept and same idea that Greenfield has. Talking about Greenfield about the secret cipher of the Euphonauts. And this whole idea that the third order, as he terms it, or maybe that others have termed it, are actually these ascended masters that were spoken of in Theosophy. And they're the same beings that contacted Adamski and Van Tassel and all these guys. And then the secret cipher goes into all the Thelema stuff too. And
yeah, and I mean George Adamski and Desmond Leslie in Flying Saucers Have Landed reference a lot of theosophical stuff anyway. There's I actually really have no idea how to pronounce it. Dizan, the Dizan papers, or
I do not know.
Well, it's among the many things that are supposed to be derived from Madame Blavatsky, and like the lost continent of Mu and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they were supposed to have come from Tibetan masters, the Tibetan masters, and that stuff gets heavily referenced. And of course, Adamski had his own kind of temple, out there, and where the observatory was. So
was that Palomar?
Yep.
Yeah, Mount Palomar. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the Royal Order of Tibet, I think was the name of it.
There was also associations with Mount Shasta.
Right.
Guy Ballard. And
there's
Pele
so many
and all that. Yeah.
There's so many interesting things. I mean, when you start to go into a rabbit hole like this, and you wonder how some of this stuff is possible, and you look at the characters involved, you start looking at all the ancillary stuff around it. One thing that we've been trying to track down is reports in Liverpool in 1975 of flying saucers appearing on TV screens that interrupted the transmission.
Okay.
And in some cases, the TVs weren't even on. So the flying saucer would just appear on the screen with the TV that wasn't even on at the time.
The flying saucer itself would appear on the screen as like a film of the flying saucer.
Well, people would see, people were reporting them outside, and then apparently these alien craft and messages were coming through on people's TV screens, and it's even TVs that weren't even on at the time. And that's something we're trying to verify, but this is a story that was reported on by Rex at the time in his magazine, which we can't get our hands on because I can't find any copies anywhere.
His magazine was called Viewpoint Aquarius?
Yep.
And you can't find any copies?
I can find some later ones on eBay. but not from the 70s. I think the Edmonton Theosophical Society has a complete collection, so I might have to hit them up. I may have to become a theosophist in order to get my hands on copies of this now.
And
I'm
Rex
willing to
wasn't.
take that risk.
Yeah, and Rex wasn't just a casual theosophist. I mean, he was his mentor was Edward Gardner,
Yep.
who's a pretty big English theosophist, and then he became, I guess later on in '83, you say that he became the chairman of the Mahatma Letters Trust, which was charged with keeping and studying the Mahatma letters to A.D. Sinet, which were some of these channel texts that Theosophy was based on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was Sinet's research for a book that he was releasing. Blavatsky never wanted those letters actually published. She wanted him to draw from them, and I guess he ended up publishing it anyway, or it got published posthumously. But those actual letters themselves are held at the British Museum, and Rex was the custodian of those and the chairman of the trust there. And he actually, during his time there, got them all put onto slides and did lectures and presentations with them and made copies for different people around the world. So he was pretty popular in Theosophy. He was well known as a for that work that he did. But he was also kind of well known in ufology, at least in England, because it's like you don't hear a lot of people talk about him now. When Steve first would mention Rex to me, it was almost as though I should know who he is, and I would just do like, okay, Google search Rex Dutta.
Yeah.
I'm coming up with a few titles of books, but that was about it, you know.
It's all about fish doctoring.
Well, I wasn't even coming up with that at first. It's like he's almost like he's a ghost online, you know.
Yeah.
It's I had to do a lot of work to find all the information I did about him.
Do you think the Theosophists were finding a lot of utility in the UFO phenomenon? Like it would be a good front to get people eventually into these more spiritual ideas, and that's why they it seems like they encouraged Rex to connect those and to kind of popularize Theosophy and these type of ideas through the UFO phenomenon.
Well, I think it worked in a lot of ways, but I mean, it did tend to work out that way. I think within Theosophy you have a lot of different points of view, and they're generally accepting of people's presentation as long as it conveys the message of the core tenets of you know. I guess there was a split in the societies of Theosophy at one point, or at more than one point. But
because you got Rudolf Steiner and Anthroposophy, and can't even say that.
Right.
You know, that's an offshoot of Theosophy, because he thought that the Theosophists were too racist or something like that.
Right, and there was a whole other thing with Ledbetter. There was a division there with that guy. So so I think within the societies they kind of give people a lot of leeway to express themselves the way they want to. You know, I think it was fortuitous for them. It kind of worked out. Spread the theosophical ideas to the ufological people. So a lot of what Rex has to say is very new agey, and it sounds a bit dated when you look at it. But I have to say, you know, it makes a weird kind of sense to me. I can see where he's coming from, and I do have a lot of respect for the guy and what he did, and having talked with Steve extensively about all this stuff, it's like he and I have become good friends, and I almost feel like we're continuing in a tradition of an investigation that Rex never actually ended up publishing, as far as anyone knows. He didn't seem to ever get around to publishing his findings on the 77 interruption, because there was no book past that point, you know.
So what did Rex and Steve start to find out? What was some of the things that they found out about these transmissions? Was there anything that they thought, well, maybe it could have come from this particular person or this particular group? Like, what was it that kind of led them down that path?
Yeah, there were some suspects. I mean, it seemed like most of the news and media at the time was just trying to brush it off as some kind of prank, you know.
Right.
And they wanted it to disappear from the news as quickly as possible. So right away, it almost seems like a cover-up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think within a few days, they had reported that it was a few college kids in Hampshire that that had about 80 pounds worth of kit, quote unquote, had overpowered the transmitter and sent out the signal as a prank. So that's, you know, 5.5 minutes of a very distorted voice that interrupted the video and audio for 5 separate transmitters spanning a section of the country that's about 1,500 square miles. You know, it's kind of a lot to do, and from what Rex and Steve were able to figure out, from one of the engineers was making a conservative estimate that it would take about a couple flatbeds worth of car batteries to produce the amount of power that you would need to overpower the main transmitter.
Yeah, something just
and even
ridiculous.
If they did, right, and even if they did, they would be able to switch it off, you know. As it stood, sort of like in the radio disruption, when that interruption was coming through on people's TV screens, the people at ITV, their monitors just showed Ivor Mills, the news presenter, giving his broadcast, just reading his cards like normal, and showing the commercials and everything like normal. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, everybody at home is hearing a message from Ashtar Galactic Command, you know. And people started calling in and complaining, and that's the only reason they knew.
So if it was a hoax, it would either have to be like an inside thing,
right?
Like someone was inside of the station, or it was something that the normal prankster, some kind of technology, they probably wouldn't have access to, something really expensive.
Yeah. Yep. So the only other option, I think, other than if you rule out space aliens and you rule out a prankster and you rule out somebody inside the station, which Steve and Rex kind of both did because they were able to check the employment records at some of these places, and it didn't seem like anybody got fired or left in a hurry, or that there were any redundancies in the staff. So you would think somebody would have disappeared, you know.
Yeah, the thought being that the television station just handled it quietly internally. Yeah,
exactly, because certainly nobody was talking. They were all under they were all under orders to say no comment, under threat of losing their job over everything that happened. So there was this whole shroud of silence over everything. That you know, is kind of weird in itself. And so I mean, the conclusion, if you rule out all that other stuff, that would mean either a foreign power did it, which would have been a real problem, or it was the English government itself testing the readiness of the independent broadcasters in the south of England. You know, just testing out something to see if it would work, to test readiness there.
That's an interesting way to do it, though. Especially pick something up that obscure, like Ashtar.
Yeah, do something that ridiculous, you know.
Yeah.
And have it come up, you know, it comes up on, I see the video pop up on Twitter or, you know, weird Facebook groups where they share stuff all the time. And people just laugh it off, and they say, "Oh yeah, that was a funny prank that somebody did," you know. And but when you look into the details of it, nobody's ever figured out who that was. And you would think somebody would admit it eventually too, for bragging rights, you know. Somebody usually comes out of the woodwork and will admit to a hoax, or a deathbed confession or something like that. But no, that's never happened. So. So it's all very interesting.
the foreign power and political implications is real interesting because, of course, a lot of those contactees were investigated for possible connections to the USSR, and the whole message of a lot of the Space Brothers is, what a lot of people would think would be communistic. And Theosophy, has its own conspiracies relating to Indian independence. So there's a lot of implications in that, too, for it being some kind of political operation or disinfo operation.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, Rex was pretty connected. I mean, he was actually in British intelligence during World War II. Right. So, I mean, he probably would have been. He was privy to a lot of things that other people wouldn't necessarily be. He was in Dunkirk and actually, lost part of his leg there, but he was working for British intelligence. So he tended to have a lot of connections all over the place. So the cover story of a few college students using Kit to overpower the transmitter, he was able to figure out that was a lie right off the bat because he knew the police in the area and was able to check their arrest logs, and nobody had been arrested, so nobody was caught and dealt with there. It seems like something bigger was going on, and Rex kind of gets into that, the weird transition between how UFOs and flying saucers and contact was all viewed in the 50s moving forward. He has these ideas that it was all reported on pretty freely all over the world, and then almost simultaneously everywhere in the world they all stopped reporting on it. And then when they did report on it again, there was a lot of ridicule. So when you're getting into the later 60s and into the 70s, there's a lot of ridicule and a slow turn towards the aliens are always hostile. Mm-hmm. So to him, it was almost like a giant, these are times where world powers couldn't agree on much of anything, but they could agree that they weren't going to talk about aliens. They weren't going to talk about Space Brothers. And then when they did talk about it, they were going to discredit witnesses and contactees, and they were going to ridicule people who hold any belief in it, And then as time went on, all of a sudden aliens, flying saucers, and UFO began to replace the word flying saucer, and abductions became more in the forefront. So it started viewing it more as a threat than a friendly contact from the stars trying to guide us in the right direction. It is kind of interesting to think about. I mean, the evolution of that idea.
Yeah, there was that shift around about probably late 70s, early 80s. You start seeing the grays just start taking over. And then, of course...
It's crazy because that's when the Cold War really heats up again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, of course, the Communion comes out in the late 80s, and that pretty much sets the standard. Intruders was another book that came out around that time.
Right.
And that sets the whole... there was the TV movie version of that, and the popularity of the gray, just because the one uniform set creature... and then we kind of have that in recent times, more of that smattering of like the reptilians. But it's interesting to see that because the accounts that you get from the 40s all the way to the 70s are different kinds of creatures. There's an assortment of them. Right. And then all of a sudden you have this just major shift. And I would look at that and I would just say that this is just this phenomenon, whatever drives the UFO phenomenon, reflecting back what it thinks we want to see. And I think especially in the West, I think popular culture drives that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that, but suppose there's people that know that and how that works and they want to drive the narrative one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
And kind of force the phenomenon's hand to take a form that's scarier,
That's a possibility. I mean, what you're talking about there is a kind of form of, that's magic. I mean, there's some probably an occultism connection to that kind of concept.
Maybe people trying to contact different kinds of things.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And, drawing down one energy or another, around that time, it was also, Steve tends to think that the reason Rex never came out with publishing the 77 investigation is there was kind of a divide in ufology at the time, with people like Gordon Crichton and stuff tending to believe that aliens had something to do with demons and stuff. So the demonic alien was becoming an idea, and if you weren't on that side, you were on the more nuts and bolts end of thing.
Yeah.
So Rex's kind of new age of Aquarius and like spiritual space brother idea was
It was out of style.
Yeah, he was kind of just pushed off to the side, because he wasn't part of that divide. I think you see a lot of that nowadays too. I think there's a lot more overlap and a lot more open-minded people, but there's still a lot of people that like to argue, and people that are very firmly in a nuts and bolts camp, and people that are very firmly in a more esoteric camp.
Oh yeah. It's really, honestly, I think that it's starting to merge.
I think so too.
I think that. Well, first
I think it
of
always
all,
has merged, though. These ideas have always been people that are willing to see it in a more holistic way, where
right.
It's not if and or, it could be nuts and bolts sometimes, but also could be ghosts another time. These days, like scrolling through Twitter, some days I feel like, it's one half TTSA, one half Hellier. And
that's a good point.
And those fights aren't going those are extremes,
But even TTSA, they like to use the whole interdimensional label too. They're not going full extraterrestrial anymore.
Yeah,
calling it the advanced aerial threats and all that. So even they're starting to kind of say that, well, hey, we can't really say that this could not. They're starting to make room for a different belief in what these things could be. Yeah,
I'm not going to venture too far down that road, but I was just using them as an example. It's just kind of more the metaphorical TTSA. A lot of the people that are inspired. So, I'm talking more about the fans of, a lot of the people that are inspired to look into things more because of TTSA are very nuts and bolts leaning,
Yes.
I would say your average person, they want documents, photos, alien metamaterials,
Yeah, the metamaterials. We want some kind of wreckage or something like that we can use that say that, concretely that there were such things as aliens.
Did Rex have any other like unique observations or takes on the phenomenon that you think are real kind of special or particular to him?
Yeah, I like
other than maybe like the theosophical stuff.
The theosophical stuff, yeah. I don't know how particular that is to him, other than he was applying the messages from space to to the ideas that theosophy already had, So he did believe we were on the cusp of a new age of man, and his predecessor and guru Gardner thought the same thing, and in his time, he was applying it more to fairies and that kind of thing, There was something that Steve told me that he felt that Rex looked at both events, both interruptions, as sort of a cosmic joke. So that kind of gets to the idea of the phenomenon kind of toying with you and having a deep part. Yeah, the trickster idea, which I think he was really in his element when he was dealing with that kind of thing. He also had ideas about nuclear power and the radiation from nuclear power that was actually, causing some of these effects, and actually harming the nature of reality. So
That's interesting.
yeah. So the reality itself was being a bit rent by nuclear waste and the use of nuclear power.
Did he think that nuclear weapons and testing, like the explosions, did some kind of weird thing to the physics of reality?
Yeah, he did.
Okay. So we've heard those kind of ideas before.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and this was stuff he was talking about in the 80s, and there was obviously a lot of a lot of anxiety about that then. And it's funny because like Strieber does talk about that a lot. He was going through a lot of anxiety about that in Communion.
Yeah, he was writing War Day at the time, I think.
Right. He was in the process of writing about it and having nightmares about it and stuff. So I think the nukes are part of it. And Steve and I talking to each other would extend that further, and the idea that electricity or the use of radar might actually interrupt the magnetics of the Earth and allow for these thin places to have a little bit of a bigger gap for things to get through.
Oh, that's very interesting, unique. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. Though it's funny, a lot of that would happen a lot in the 70s, where there was a book I was reading called Alien Animals by Janet and Colin Board, who used to write for the Fortean Times and stuff like that. They were interested in the ideas of ley lines, but they also thought a lot of cryptids appeared near electrical power sources, and they wondered if electrical grids being spread out more and radio waves being more prevalent could contribute to interdimensional entities coming through.
Then a lot of those contactees were just using radio, shortwave radio, and they were saying they were communicating with things through that.
Exactly. Yeah, little ham radios at Giant Rock, and then you have the Integratron that
right. Yep.
that was the logical extreme of that. But it all comes down to tones and frequencies. It's like that quote that's attributed to Tesla. Tones and frequencies. So it's maybe just music. Maybe music would do it. Which that does get back to the Hellier thing too.
Yeah.
But the same year of that interruption, Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, and there you have
little phrase,
and there you have, and that's how they communicated with them at the Devil's Tower, was through a melody. It's a tones, frequency, vibration. I think that all has a lot to do with it personally.
Well, it reminds me when you're talking about cryptids being brought in. It reminds me of the stuff from the Rebirth of Pan, about where he talks about the things happening in Lover's Lane, or like things happening in trailer parks, because they're essentially like orgone accumulators.
Yeah.
And that causes causes some kind of hole in the environment where these things are able to come through.
Yeah, so suppose those guys were all onto something with just radio waves and just power lines causing these kind of effects. And nowadays we have, wireless internet everywhere. We have Bluetooth, and we have 4G going on to 5G. Cellular technology. You got to imagine that if just basic electromagnetism has an effect, and radio waves have an effect, then what is all the other stuff going to do?
That's those 5G AI demons that are coming, man.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of feel, in a sense, though, that a lot of that you just listed really keeps us distracted from really, like, if we turned all that off, I feel like we'd almost see more things, because we'd be more aware of our environment than if we didn't have those different items.
Yeah, I mean that is a really good point.
But I guess
Yeah.
those are like you talk about how it's related to the ideas of channeling, whether it's a person being an antenna using a a person using dowsing rods, or someone having a text channeled through them, or people
Right.
were experimenting with radio and ghost boxes and all these kind of ideas. They were kind of this all the same thing in the minds of people while this technology was being developed, and you had spiritualism and its offshoots happening and at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it was that time for that to happen.
Well,
But it's also the idea that people are able to talk to each other more quickly about the things they're seeing as a
Yes.
result of the communication.
yeah.
So did the communication cause anomalous phenomena, or were people able to talk about it more quickly with each other?
Well, I was gonna bring up that Edison around that same time, he had this whole idea to build a machine that he could speak to the dead.
Right.
So this
And,
wasn't actually something that you could say that Edison is not somebody that's considered a crockpot, or a crackpot. That's not someone that you would say, hey, that guy's crazy. But like the actual idea that maybe through this technology, maybe we could actually reach something.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, Tesla, I think, had reported communicating with entities.
Yeah.
I don't remember what he called them, but yeah, I mean, Tesla and Edison both had that kind of experience, or at least that idea in their heads. Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder where these ideas come from. Throughout history, you have people, I mean, that seem to have an idea that comes out of nowhere. It's almost like it was put in their head, Rex actually recounts a tale of Robert Oppenheimer when they were doing a test of a nuclear bomb, realizing that the way they were going to test where they were going to test a hydrogen bomb was going to cause a chain reaction that could end all life on Earth. He only realized it because of a dream that he had, and in Rex's mind, that was put there by the Space Brothers. They interceded and put that dream in his head so that to keep him from blowing up the planet, but that kind of thing has happened throughout the history of science. It's a lot of people just seem inspired by something that came to them in a dream,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you do get that a lot. That does happen quite a lot.
So what's your personal take on these two transmissions, though? I mean, do you have an opinion or something that you really lean towards?
They seem to be related. They seem to be. I would venture to guess the same entity, whatever that entity may be. I mean, Steve doesn't entirely rule out that Rex could have conspired to have these things happen himself, but he didn't think so. He said it wasn't really in his character to do such a thing. But I mean, that's also a possibility. Suppose with his connections, the fact that he was kind of involved on those levels would be kind of funny. But I think it's just a cosmic joke. I think I think that the trickster loves a hoax, and the trickster loves fitting itself in somewhere where it's never going to be taken seriously. The 77 interruption happened in between the series on ITV that spawned the whole Alternative 3 idea, and when Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out, it was around that same time. People were already primed for a prank because I think that was the same year. It was April of 77 that program came out. Or it was supposed to be April.
You're right.
But
It was supposed to be April.
because
It was supposed to be
it was an April
1st.
Fool's Day. Yeah, it was supposed to be an April Fool's Day joke, but because of a strike at ITV, it got pushed back. So I mean, there was already bogus alien programming out there, and then this happens right after, a couple months after. So it's I think whether it's people from space, it's Rex kind of puts them as just kind of etheric consciousnesses, not necessarily physical flesh and blood beings from Venus, but entities that are around, and I don't think that's beyond the pale. If you watch that video and listen to it, your first impression is just, this can't be real. This is some kind of prank. It actually looks like something that would happen on an episode of Doctor Who or something like that, But there doesn't seem to be great explanations for it, as far as I'm concerned. And I like to lean toward a wackier concept. I like to have a worldview where some of these really outrageous things are possible. So
Sure.
so I don't know.
But yeah,
I really didn't.
Did Van Tassel have any followers out there? Was there a
Yeah,
was there
how did the
Okay.
actual Ashtar command people react to it?
because I'm sure
Well,
that they were
Van
the
Tassel
first ones to be suspected.
Van Tassel had already abandoned the Ashtar command stuff by
So
that point.
no one was carrying that torch at that time?
I don't think so. Possibly Reverend Bob Short of the Blue Rose Ministries. And a lot of the best information I got about this stuff came from a book that he released back in like 2012, I think. Message Out of the Stars by Robert Short. So I didn't realize who he was when I bought the book. I just knew it had some information that I needed. And Adam Gorightly actually has a pretty good,
Great
like
guy.
it's more of an obituary, I guess, but he has a good write-up on him on the Chasing UFOs blog.
Okay.
Very interesting character, but he was there at Giant Rock with Van Tassel, and he kind of adopted some of the Ashtar channel stuff. And Van Tassel ended up he ended up not using it in his writings anymore after, I think, like 1957 or 58. So by the 70s, now you got to remember this is also in the UK and not the US where Van Tassel was. You had George King was the Ethereus Society.
Yeah.
That guy over there, he was kind of the UK version. So he may have been using that. And 77 was also around the same time that Tuella comes on the scene as the main channel for Ashtar Galactic Command. Robert Short writes about it in his book and takes it all very seriously. He thinks that it actually is thought transference from a flying saucer that caused both the interruptions in both cases, and does briefly mention the Liverpool stuff. But that's also a guy that claims to be channeling aliens. So, where was I going with that train of thought? Yeah, that's around the time Tuella takes over with that. And like I said at the beginning of this, there's a lot of debate over exactly how the voice identifies itself in the 77 interruption. So you can't make it out. So the name itself sometimes is Vrillon, which, sounds a lot like the Vril Society and
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it's written as Grahama or Gahama.
Uh huh.
It sounded like Virlon to me, but I guess that's
Yeah.
probably because I was reading the text at the same time.
I've also
Getting front loaded.
I've also seen Trillion, and I've also seen what was the other one? Asteron.
That's a way cooler name. That's
Asteron, yeah. I mean, and then for the Ashtar Galactic Command part, I think he actually only says Ashtar Command, but that's transcribed a couple different ways too, depending on where you go. And then in the 71 radio interview part, he never actually, the voice doesn't identify itself at all. It just says it's calling, from outer space. And when they do talk to it, the assistant producer just refers to the voice as Sir, like, how are you doing, sir? And then the voice just becomes sir, you know? Then no identification and no explanation beyond that.
Which that had a real trickster element to it. It was kind of like messing with the dude.
Yeah, it seemed that way. That whole conversation is really wild, and I couldn't help but chuckle when I was reading it the first time, because it really did seem like a comedy routine to me, you know. Especially, you know, towards the end, he asks him, "How can I reach you next time?" You know, he says, "Call outer space sometime."
Call outer space sometime.
And he's just like, how do I call you? And the voice says, "You can call me sir." And he goes, "How do I call you, sir?" And he says, "You can call me sir any way you like. I don't mind. Anyway, I must return to space." So it sounds to me like a bit between Groucho Marx and Chico Marx. You know, it's just where, you know, Chico's can't understand what he's saying because he's speaking English as a second language, you know.
Man, that is so fascinating. Like, how you've done 3 blog entries on this. Are you going to be digging a lot more into it?
Yeah, I have another one that I'm working on. It does get into a bit of a Discordian angle with it.
Yes.
Getting back into the Adam Gorightly stuff, because he had this is a lot of information that came at me when I figured I was pretty much done researching it and was ready to write it up in a blog. A lot of new information dropped in my face, so I found Gorightly had tweeted an article that he wrote a while back about Robert Anton Wilson and receiving signals from Sirius during the Sirius star system, and corresponding with Timothy Leary.
Yep.
And this was around 1975 that Wilson wrote an article with the headline "Awaiting messages from Galactic Central Command" or something like that.
Yeah.
So him and Greg Hill were anticipating messages from outer space to be on TV and radio all over the world. And this is in 1975, so they pretty much called it, you know.
Wasn't it Wilson, Leary, and then wasn't Dick also having things at the same time?
Yeah, Valis and all that.
The Valis stuff was happening right around that time too.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's in the mid 70s is a hell of a time for high weirdness, but it's funny for there to be a Discordian angle to it to me because I consider myself Discordian and I post a lot of Discordian stuff. And I think that's how me and Steve became friends in the first place. So it almost feels like a weird full circle. Got from Steve on Twitter. He sent me a message that just said, "All hail Discordia."
Hilarious.
So, yeah,
well,
exactly.
I gotta ask you. I gotta ask you this. All right.
Yep.
We got this. You mentioned it a couple times. In light of this, your Discordian stuff, what's your thoughts on Hellier?
Oh, my thoughts on Hellier?
Yeah.
Well, when that first came out, I really didn't anticipate it having the impact that it did on me personally and on people everywhere. But I watched it pretty alone, you know, with nobody to really talk to about it. I had been following The Week in Weird and the Newkirks online for quite a while before that, and I remember seeing, you know, in the first season they have this synchronicity that with one of the Week in Weird articles about the Kentucky Goblins between Carl and Greg.
Right.
And it's like I remember reading that article, so it's like I've been following them for at least that long. So when this series finally came out, I was just like, oh, hell yeah, it's finally here, you know? So, I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but I went into it already ready to eat it up. And I really do love the show. I love the series. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there. I think it's anytime you have people stumbling onto the work of John Keel for the first time, as a result of something, that's a win for the paranormal, I think. and the effect that the series has had on people and their personal lives and their interpersonal lives and their view of the world, I think, is really astounding. And I've actually made some pretty great friends via Twitter that I would consider very good friends now. Not just internet people, very good friends specifically because of that series. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting the Newkirks in Rhode Island right after the series came out, the first season.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I said to Greg when I first talked to him. Like, do you realize how much of an effect this is having on people on the internet? Like, look at people's posts on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, the synchronicities from the show is really spreading. Like, is this something you're hearing a lot? And obviously it just really snowballed. You don't see people get that enthusiastic for no reason about something, So I guess you could say I'm a fan.
I think the second season though just like took it to a whole new level of weirdness. I mean, it was the second season was I loved it. The first season, I mean, it was okay, You definitely lay in the groundwork, but the second season is just there's so much there.
Yeah, they took it to all the places you really hoped they would. I mean, it definitely doesn't disappoint. I love that Greenfield's in it.
Yeah.
And the interview you guys did with Alan Greenfield was pretty mind blowing. I really liked that.
Thanks a lot.
And,
that was
it's really cool that you got him at the It's cool that you got him at the conference.
Yeah,
he's gonna be cool.
He's gonna be there.
But that was a synchronicity for you guys, right?
Yeah, there was a synchronicity there too, because like I knew that the Secret Cipher was in Hellier, but really I just had wanted to get Greenfield on. Somebody else kind of hooked us up with him and one of our other guests, and we do the show and then we put it out the next week. Well, we put that show out just as they put season 2 of Hellier out.
Right, yeah.
And then all of a
so
sudden,
you hadn't seen it yet. Yeah. I remember you guys talking about that. There was a weird synchronicity there for me too, because when I listened to that interview with Greenfield, right at the beginning, you kind of fade in with a conversation about Carrie Thornley.
Right.
And,
right.
And he was talking about briefly about Operation Mindfuck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I realized after listening to that for a couple of minutes that, now wait a minute, the whole reason I got really interested in Discordianism to begin with was an interview I read written by Greenfield like years ago, and I couldn't remember who it was until I heard him talking about it on your show. And it was like the fade in. He's just like talking about Carrie Thornley and interviewing him in this magazine. And I go, oh my God, that was the interview. That got me really.
This is the thing where I wanted to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit with you, is that I feel that this email that was sent to the Newkirks just reeks of Operation Mindfuck stuff. I feel like there is an element of that, and
and that you can start that a magical working can start with a hoax,
right?
See, that's what.
Yeah,
you're speaking my language now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so something like what you're studying, it could be something that people put out there to then view the ripples that it's going to create. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, a hoax or a hoax is just as intriguing as anything else, because a hoax can still carry a weight and a power to it that can manifest something real beyond it, and then it becomes a chicken and an egg kind of thing.
Yep.
And it's really fascinating. Are you guys familiar with a guy named Doc Shields?
It sounds familiar to me, but I'm not.
He's a wizard.
With him.
He was a wizard from Cornwall that conjured the Loch Ness monster. back in the
Okay.
70s.
Yeah, I've heard.
Okay, we're gonna have to ask Mark about that.
What's that?
We've got a friend from Cornwall.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Mark Anthony Wyatt.
Mark
Yeah.
Anthony Wyatt, yeah. Definitely ask, because you're having him on again, right?
Yeah, he'll be coming. Yeah, he'll be coming on.
Yeah. I think Doc Shields still lives there. He'd be in his 80s now. But fascinating character. Obviously very goofy and funny. Musician, sleight of hand magician, surrealist artist, and monster hunter. He had this whole project called Monster Mind, where he would hire nude witches to dance on the beach to summon water beasts.
That sounds fun.
And but I mean, weird stuff does happen, and he claims that he never faked anything. Mm-hmm. He had these photographs. The Owl Man in Cornwall was reported around that time. People think all of it was a hoax, but nevertheless, people do see monsters there, So, is he really a wizard? Is he really creating stuff, and only he can really see it, or the people that are seeing things are seeing something that he conjured,
right. And of course, that's explored a lot in the Trickster and the Paranormal book.
Yeah,
those ideas.
I have to admit, I haven't gotten around to reading it yet, but
I'm just cracking it, man.
I'm reading a little excerpts from it that people direct me to, but yeah, I mean, there's examples of that everywhere. I mean, and a lot of people think Loch Ness, the reason there's a monster there was because of Crowley's workings anyway. the Abramelin and the Mage calling down the higher guardian angel and not completing the ceremony.
Right.
So, yeah, it does become. You wonder where the joke stops and where the reality sets in, or vice versa.
Yeah,
so,
I think that the fun part of that is you don't know. You don't.
Right.
It's and of course you're going into liminality, right?
And you're not allowed.
There's an in between.
So
That's why
I
think Discordianism is a healthy way to look at the paranormal.
Yeah, it is. Well, and with this Hellier moment,
it.
are we going to look back on this moment kind of like how we look back on that serious time? I mean, it seems like a lot of things have happened around this whole Hellier theme in a lot of people's lives. A lot of people have documented this. So I'm wondering if we're going to look back on this like one of those moments.
And the secret cipher of the Euphonauts is back in play, and
right.
I have had my own weird synchronicities with Secret Cipher. I'm in some weird stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've had plenty of weird stuff happen to me all my life, so I tend to take it in stride. But but the Hellier thing has kind of kicked it off in a lot of other people. I'm hesitant to get too excited about what you might call a synchronicity versus what's just a kind of a coincidence. I don't want to seem like I'm overreacting to anything, but
sure.
And there is a lot. It does seem like almost a general awakening for a lot of people to ideas and concepts that they maybe wouldn't have explored otherwise, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I hope it's a good thing. I hope it's a good thing. There's a certain part of me that some of this stuff, where a lot of us have been on the fringe of all this for a long time. We've known about a lot of these ideas. I just hope it's not going to get too popularized to where it just becomes meaningless. That's not my only danger that I could see happening, possibly.
Well, I mean, I don't think it will unless the Newkirks sell out and get a show on a big network and. let those people call the shots. They
may
seem
not
pretty
be
adamant about not doing that. So
and it may not be really. This stuff may have a limit to how much it can be popularized because it's not simply understood. It's kind of for more, intellectual types or nerds or whatever. It's a little more heady.
I think the overall message of Hellier is not to go looking for blue star balloons and tin cans and using specifically the secret cipher of the Euphonauts. It's to open your eyes and look at your own personal story and the stories around you using tools that you might not have otherwise thought of.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, right in the first season there, Dana pulling out tarot cards while they're out looking for goblins, in their downtime, doing a tarot card reading about where to find the goblins. Like, that really hit me, because I've always thought tarot should be used in any kind of investigation, because why wouldn't you, And I had never actually seen somebody do it before, so that blew me away,
Yeah.
Something that small.
Yeah, there's that cross fertilization there between.
Right. And I'm seeing a lot of people do that now with a lot of the, getting back to the Liminal Earth stuff, a lot of the Liminal ambassadors, when they go to a place, they'll bring cards with them, whether it's tarot cards or oracle cards, and they'll do a quick read on a place when they go, and exploring all these aspects of weirdness that I don't think I haven't seen a whole lot of before. I think the overall message of Hellier is finding a truth in things that maybe other people haven't explored or wouldn't bother exploring. It doesn't necessarily mean get in your truck and go down to
Kentucky.
West Virginia. Yeah, but or West Virginia or any of the other places they went.
I think there's plenty of weirdness around anybody's given local area.
Probably shouldn't go bother Woody Derenberger's daughter. But to me, it's almost like, what's the craziest thought you've ever had? Now go follow that thread.
Right.
Why? Because why not? I mean, you're gonna find interesting things along the way, either way. So for me, that's Mystery Signals from Outer Space in the 1970s, and Theosophy and a Fish Doctor, and the rock star that's telling me the story. For other people, it might be Haunted Bricks, or something else, So, I think it's all good. I think it's all good stuff.
Well,
and I don't care to get drawn into arguments about any of it online.
I agree.
It's not worth my time.
Absolutely. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This has been really good. I've really enjoyed hearing about this obscure case, and I think it's really, really fascinating. Let's tell everybody where they can find you, find the research that you're doing.
Right.
And
okay.
Remind everybody about Liminal Earth.
Yep, Liminal Earth. If anybody has a weird story to tell and need a place to tell it, that can be judgment-free and even anonymous if you so choose, you can go to liminal.earth, all lowercase, and you have a map right there. Very easy to submit, or just read other people's stories if that's more your speed. You can find my blog at apstrange.com. Tends to be the name I write under, AP Strange, and I'm on Twitter posting little tidbits and facts every day, usually with the hashtag on this day, because I can't stop doing it because they won't let me know. And you can find me at A Prodigiosis there, which I picked for ease of people to remember. But if you do at APRO, usually I pop up pretty quickly. So if you think of APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, just do that after the @ symbol, and you'll find me.
Nice. Okay. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Guys, thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, check this stuff out. It's really interesting. We'll love to get you back on. We'll talk about some of the other stuff on the blog too. Maybe dig a little deeper on some things too. So.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. Well, stay on the line for us. We're going to close this section out, and guys, we'll be back to close out the show on Conspirinormal. was an interview with Matt Hopwell from the AP Strange blog, which stands for Aficionado Prodigious, something like that. Words are hard sometimes. And also, he's the part of the whole Liminal Earth group that has the very cool website called liminal.earth.
And if you have any strange experiences, you should submit it to Liminal Earth.
And they say if there is a specific place where you've seen fairies, ghosts, Bigfoot, time travelers, extraterrestrials, ultraterrestrials, crow conferences, sentient lawn computers, lanyard ogres, broccoli wizards, etc.
Broccoli wizards?
Broccoli wizards. I don't know. Does your town have an urban legend you'd love to get to the bottom of? Send us your story and we might include it on our map. And I thought we would read something real quick here for the one over for Nashville. I thought this one was interesting. It says, uneasy feeling. I'm not sure if anyone else has experienced this in Nashville, but every now and then I will notice an uneasy and heavy feeling on certain nights, like something large looms in the sky overhead. I remember one night in February when this happened. It was about 9:30 or 10 at night, and I was out in my front yard with my dog. The darkness of the night was unordinary. There were no stars in the sky, and the sky had more of a dark gray color than black. I had this uneasy feeling that something was watching me and my dog, and though I couldn't tell where I was being observed from, it felt very much like there were eyes on us. It was dead quiet. No cars passed through our neighborhood, no dogs barked from nearby yards, and no planes flew overhead. My dog even picked up on this uncomfortable and odd feeling. She was quick to turn around and go back indoors. It felt so peculiar that I asked my boyfriend to come outside and observe it, and he agreed, observing that it felt like we were in a contained space with a ceiling above us. Submitted by Kiki D.
That's weird.
Very weird. So that's one of the things for Nashville. There's another one about enormous deer. That's closer to us, one of the suburbs. Church Clapper. That's a ghost one. And a cryptid in Fairview, which is another like kind of suburb of Nashville. So I thought that was kind of an interesting one to read. Really grabbed my attention when I was browsing through it. All right, so guys, that's it for this episode. Please check out our Patreon. It is there. We are doing weekly episodes now. Some of them are longer than others. Some of them are shorter than others. Some of them are us talking about news events. Some of them are special things that we might do in relation to an episode. And some of them is us talking just a little extra time with the guests. And right now, $1 gets you in. So you can find there's several posts there from since the end of 2016 that you guys can listen to. And like I said, we're doing weekly things, so please help us out if you really like the show. T-shirts are available at TeePublic. You can find Conspirinormal t-shirts there. We've got the Bigfoot, and we also have the skull design with the fez, and also donations on the on the internet on the website as well.
Conspirinormal.com.
Conspirinormal.com.
And we should have a special message from the Ashtar Command coming up soon on Patreon. We are going to do recreations of the messages, so that should be fun. Instead of having a usual discussion episode, we're going to give you a little something fun this week.
Yeah, we'll give you something to look forward to. All right, guys, that's it. Don't forget Strange Realities Conference. We may have the prices out by the time this hits. We may not, but it is happening. It is happening September 25th and 26th of 2020 at SIR Nashville. We are 7 months away, but that time is going to go quick. So, guys, once tickets become available, get them. Get everything secure. We're giving you enough time to get your travel plans ready. We've got really great speakers, which we'll reveal more of in the weeks and months to come. Okay, well, that's it, guys. Thank you so much, and we will be back next week with another special guest on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.